Hello, I'm David Miller with Next Generation Assessment, and I'm from the University of Florida, where I'm a professor in research and evaluation methods, and I'm also the school director of human development and organizational studies in education. And today, with my co-host, we are going to be talking about the topic of accreditors' perspective on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thanks, David, and welcome everyone. I'm Tammie Cumming. I'm the Associate Provost for Institutional Effectiveness at Brooklyn College of the City University of New York. And I'm so excited to welcome Dr. Laura Gambino, a former colleague from CUNY, from the New England Commission for Higher Education. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you, Tammie. It's a pleasure to be here and to be back talking with both of you.
Okay, well, thank you. We're glad to have you here. Our first question for today then is, we just want to understand, how is the New England Commission of Higher Education addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion now?
So that's a great question. So thanks for starting there. You know, it's interesting. The Commission's had a mantra for many, many years where we talk about, and the staff talk about, all students, all locations, all modalities when we think about accreditation. And that in that first piece, all students, I think that that notion of diversity, equity, and inclusion is there implicitly. Like we would talk about when we talked with institutions about who are your different subpopulations of students, who do you need to think about as you're thinking about student learning and success. But it was implicit in that mantra, right? But that's been around for a very long time. We've been talking about that, all students, all locations, all modalities. But the Commission's standards go through a review process and a revision process. So every 10 years, the Commission undertakes a major revision of the standards. The last time that took place was in 2016. And then at the 5-year mark, they do what is referred to as a mid-course review, where they make some minor tweaks to the standards, kind of based on what's going on in higher ed and in the region. And so that process took place in 2020. And in January 2021, our new standards went into place from this mid-course revision. And in there, in this version, the notion of diversity, equity, and inclusion became much more explicit. So in the standard on students, in the statement of the standard, there is language specifically referring to diversity, equity, and inclusion. In the standard on teaching, learning, and scholarship, there's language related to setting and achieving goals for diversity, equity, and inclusion for faculty and other educators. And in the standard on institutional resources, there's explicit language now about the institution setting and achieving its goals for diversity, equity, and inclusion for staff. So the Commission is thinking not just in terms of students, but in terms of all different stakeholder groups on campus. So now it's much more explicit in the language of the standards.
Sounds like a lot of very broad changes, and that's a good thing to see happening there.
I was going to say, Laura, I had a chance to speak to one of my colleagues this morning who's getting ready to serve as an evaluator for the Commission on one of the external reviews. And he was saying that when he went through his training, that the attention was given to this standard. And I was wondering what you think the impact will be moving forward as a result of this standard, or something that you've already seen since you've been doing this for a while.
So I think what the Commission hopes and expects is that the impact will be very positive. I mean, first of all, it's been kind of an affirmation and a validation of all the good work that our institutions were already doing in regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Let's face it, you know, institutions in New England didn't start doing this work on January 1, 2021. They've been doing it for a very long time. And so for those institutions, it really can be that kind of affirmation or the validation, like, this is important. See, the Commission recognizes this work that we're doing as important, so we need to continue doing that work. I think the other kind of piece of impact is for institutions, it can also be an opportunity to kind of leverage and kind of build on the work that they're doing, right? To be able to say, here are the Commission's expectations with regards to students and faculty and staff. And so we really need to be focusing our attention on this. So I think the Commission is hoping that the impact will help institutions do this work. And I think the other thing in terms of impact that the commission is hoping is not just that institutions are gathering the data and looking at the data, but the commission is very much focused on how are institutions setting their goals and then taking steps to improve to achieve those goals. And that kind of improvement focus is really where the attention of the commission is going to be, and really what the hope is, right? That if an institution has goals and it's not quite meeting them, that it's taking steps to improve, and it's, you know, aligning its strategic priorities around these areas and putting funding towards initiatives that will help achieve these goals in each of these 3 different areas. So, I mean, really the ultimate impact is that student learning and success is improving, and there's an inclusive environment for everyone, students, faculty, and all, you know, stakeholders at an institution. It's a big, lofty impact, but I think, you know, that's really what the commission is hoping to see.
It sounds like this is an important thing because it's making what was, I think from your description, perhaps not as explicit before, very explicit now, and probably that results in a lot more substantial change, or is that that a lot of that change was happening and it's just documenting it?
I think it's a little bit of both, depending on institutions, right? For some institutions, you know, they're doing this work and this gives them a chance to kind of really highlight it through the accreditation processes, through their self-studies, through their interim reports. I think for other institutions, it will help. They can kind of leverage this language to kind of advance that work. So I think, you know, we talk about it and the commission talks about it, not so much as a substantial change, but more as heightened awareness. You know, so the commission has had heightened awareness and attention to assessment and improvement for many, many years, and finances more recently. And now diversity, equity, and inclusion has been kind of added to that heightened awareness list. So when institutions come in front of the commission with a self-study, an interim report, a progress report, whatever it may be, the commission is looking for the institution to have set goals for equity, diversity, and inclusion, and is taking steps towards achieving those. And if it's okay, I just kind of like want to pause there, because I think it's really important to kind of emphasize that. I think when we first started having conversations about the revised standards, that was the question that came up most frequently for us, was like, so what is the commission's definition of equity, or what is the commission's definition of diversity? And what I love about this commission and working here in New England is that the standards and the language we've used, and even when I've been talking about it now, is not very prescriptive. And I think that's key to working here in New England and what's working here in this region, and that we have such a diversity of institutions, right? And each institution, really, it's incumbent on them to define equity, diversity, and inclusion in a way that supports their student populations and aligns with their missions. You know, you can envision that, you know, equity, diversity, and inclusion looks very different at Harvard or MIT than it does at Northern Maine Community College or Middlebury College or the Conway School of Landscape Design. So there is no definition of those terms in our standards, but the expectation is that institutions will have that conversation, right? And so it's a great opportunity for institutions to begin to have or continue to have that conversation about equity, diversity, and inclusion in their student populations on their campus, and to set their own goals for student learning and success in regards to this, and their own goals for faculty diversity and staff diversity and inclusion.
Absolutely. And it seems, as we've been talking to the accreditors throughout the nation, you know, people are in different stages of this work. And it's such an important conversation in ensuring fairness of opportunity for our students and making sure they have fairness along the way, diversity, equity, inclusion, in order to satisfy the requirements and complete their degrees.
Absolutely, I agree. And I think it's going to become increasingly important as we know that the demographics of the student population is going to be changing. And so institutions need to be prepared for that and be responding to that. So I don't think the attention on equity, diversity, and inclusion is going away. I think just the opposite. I think it's going to continue and be even more heightened in the future.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. This has been a very interesting conversation, and it's good to hear about all the good work that's going on in New England.